Hello, Alana.
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Sorry for the delay. It's been a day.
I gotcha. No worries. I get it. Life happens. Are you
Yeah.
in a?
I'm in Massachusetts. I'm on the East Coast. Yeah, it's freezing.
I have family like right outside of Boston in Holliston, Massachusetts.
Okay. Yeah, we're about 45 minutes south of Boston.
What are you doing in Massachusetts?
I live here now. My fiance lives out here with his two little kids. So I just recently moved from Manhattan Beach, California to here. So there you have
You,
it.
live, you lived in Jersey though for a little bit too, so
I did, yeah. So, but you never get really used to the cold again. Once you live
yeah.
in California, like you get spoiled.
No, I grew up right outside of Secaucus, New Jersey, so I'm now in
I worked
Phoenix.
in Secaucus. I
Yeah,
worked in
you were with,
Secaucus 2 years.
yeah, you were with the network for those few years, right?
Yeah,
Going
yeah,
from Colorado all the way to Jersey and then back to LA.
yeah.
Total culture changes.
Very different places for sure.
Oh my God. Well, thanks so much for doing this. I hope I don't take too much of your time here, but I wanted to pick your brain about, certain things that you've done in the industry. I'm an aspiring sportscaster, podcaster, filmmaker, all this different stuff. I'm kind of just like dipping my toes in the water because again, you only
Okay.
live once and I'd like to experience a lot of different things. So I like picking people's brains about, not only their careers, but how they've like been able to balance their careers with their lives. Achieving happiness is obviously the most important thing, and that's what you're doing right now, doing what you're doing. So I guess just kind of to start with you, growing up in Colorado, being, because I know you were like a big Broncos family, you guys growing up in Colorado Springs. So was it always for you, because you didn't initially want to, pursue journalism right off the bat, or was it more of along the lines that you didn't know what you wanted right off the bat? Like, what was your experience, going into school, trying to do what you wanted to do?
Well, I think when I originally was in high school, going into college for the first time, I really didn't even think of journalism as an industry. I didn't know any better. I mean, I didn't have a lot of people before me that got into this industry, and so I kind of went the business route, and I received a bachelor's in international business with a marketing emphasis, and kind of just went the sales and hospitality route, and then I was just really bored. I worked in the beverage industry and the hospitality industry for about 5 years. And then I said, if I could do anything, what would it be? And I was always been a sports fan. So I just said, I kind of had an epiphany and said, if I could do anything, what would it be? And I went back to school and I took a second mortgage out of my house to go back to college and pay for it. And got into journalism. And when I started, I didn't even know what a beat was. I had no idea like what the crime beat was or education beat or a beat writer or whatever. So I was very, very green and starting at the bottom, but I was also a lot older than most people. I didn't go back to school to get my master's in journalism until I was 28. So completely switched gears and completely started over, and always been a sports fan. Knew I really wanted to do something I was passionate about. It didn't feel like a job, and got a master's in journalism and started at the bottom. Worked, there's 200 television markets, and I worked my way up to, I worked in the number one market in the country and the number two market in the country. But I started at number 142. So it's just, it's a process. And, 17 years later, here we are.
I mean, going back to school and, like you said, taking a mortgage out of your home in order to go back, like that's got to be probably the biggest motivator that there is, because you're like, all right, I'm 2 feet in, like I have to make the most out of this, because at the same time I'm sacrificing a lot in order to get it.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing was I always bet on myself, and it was certainly a risk. I mean, I quit my job. I took a second mortgage out of my house. I went back to school. I knew nothing when I started. Was going to take to be a reporter, but I think I knew that it was something I was passionate about, and I knew it was something that I cared about very much, and I always bet on myself. So while it was certainly a risk, I honestly I did it and kind of never looked back. So it was well worth it, considering the career I've been fortunate enough to have.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, you definitely have to look back and say, like, thank God I made the right decision. It all worked out at the end of the day. And you weren't at first like the biggest baseball fan, right? Because obviously growing up in Colorado, you didn't get the Rockies until what, like 93, 94, and then
Yeah.
like a big football fan. How are you able to make that big adjustment? Because I know you got the gig with the Rockies, during their run, early on, late 2000s, 2007, they go on that massive run, go to the World Series. Were you, again, kind of like learning like on the cusp of things, like looking back at it now, like compared to your knowledge of the game now, as opposed to it was back then, kind of just like, again, going on the cusp and trying to figure things out?
I think, in this industry, when you're starting out, you go where the jobs are. And I knew I had always wanted to get back to Colorado. I mean, being born and raised there, and as you mentioned, a big Broncos fan. But no, we didn't have Major League Baseball until we had pro ball, but we didn't have Major League ball until 93. And I was a senior in high school. And, so Major League Baseball was kind of foreign to us. I mean, obviously we were an expansion team along with the Tampa Bay at the time, the Devil Rays. And it was an opportunity to get back to Colorado. And I knew very little. I knew the basics of baseball, but I knew very little about, the intricacies of the game and the strategy and everything. And I remember I was in Madison, Wisconsin at the time. I was at CBS there covering all, everything Wisconsin related sports. And I had an out in my contract that said if there was an opportunity in Denver, they had to let me go. And they did, and they were gracious, and it was fine. But it was to cover baseball. And Aaron Cook at the time was the Rockies ace, and he's a sinker ball guy. And I was like, I don't even know what that is. But, you just put yourself out there, and I learned, and I asked questions, and I studied, and I learned, and I watched games. And, now baseball's my favorite, and there's not a single Major League Baseball game that I wouldn't watch or go to or whatever. And, I've spent the majority of my television sports career in baseball. Whereas if you would have asked me that when I got into this, I would have probably told you it was my least favorite as far as the 5 major sports are concerned. So, or the 4 major really, if you think about it. But, it's, you never know. I mean, it's so hard to get into this industry. It's even harder to stay, and you kind of go where the jobs are. And in order for me to get back to Colorado at the time, it was going to be primarily a baseball job. And it turned out to be, one of the greatest decisions I ever made, because I can't imagine my life now without baseball in it.
I mean, it kind of goes to show how much like you can actually plan, but at the end of the day, God's got his own plan. Like you wouldn't even have imagined, like 15 years ago, like you would have been in the situation that you are now, covering a sport that didn't necessarily like expect to, want to cover and fall in love with. Who were some of the, the mentors early on when you were trying to figure things out, whether it was with the Rockies or even later on with the Dodgers?
Yeah, I think I get that question quite a bit about who in the industry kind of paved the way for me. And I think there's a lot of, really great people that have done this, both men and women. I didn't have one person that I was like, oh my gosh, I have to have that person's job. It wasn't one person that I idolized, but there are people in this industry, certainly of both genders, that I admire in terms of the work that they do. I mean, I think Mike Tirico is phenomenal. I think John Saunders does an amazing job. I think in terms of females, Michelle Tafoya is tremendous. She's, unflappable. Linda Cohn has done it for decades and has done an amazing job in terms of this industry. Susie Kolber, I look up to a lot. I mean, more people, people probably your age and younger, people like Laura Rutledge, who's doing so many different things with ESPN in terms of their SEC coverage and everything she's doing with the NFL. And, I've known her for a really long time. And there's a lot of women in this industry I admire. Chris Budden, who's also on ESPN, Allison Williams on ESPN, Emily Jones, who's my counterpart with the Texas Rangers, Sophia Minnaert with the Brewers, Jenny Cavnar with the Rockies, who actually took my job when I left the Rockies to go to MLB Network. We have a constant thread of about 7 sideline reporters that are constantly going back and forth about just, funny things or things in the industry or questions or, things that we've been approached with or approached by. And there's a lot of people in this industry that have done it the right way that I look up to and I admire as colleagues now versus somebody like, oh, I wish I could have their job. It's more of like that person's my friend and my colleague. But I think the one person throughout my entire life that's been like the biggest role model or whatever is just my mom. I mean, my mom's always been somebody that has never pushed but always supported. And, she's obviously been the one that's known me the longest and the constant in my life.
The one that knows you the best too. And
Yeah, I would think so.
yeah, you like rattle off like a plethora of different names. Or that again, that kind of goes to show like the networking aspect of the business too. Like everybody is, so giving, and networking is about giving at the end of the day. Like I feel like a lot of kids, at least my age, are kind of still trying to figure that out. How have you felt like early on when you're, quote unquote climbing the ladder in the business, trying to like find your niche, trying to find your spot, trying to accomplish your goals at the end of the day? How early on did you figure out that it is important to, again, like help others along the way as opposed to just like worrying about yourself? Because I know at least kids, again, my age, still trying to kind of figure it out. But like, again, it's about those life experiences early on that kind of mold you into what your mentality is going forward. So how early on did you kind of figure that stuff out?
I mean, I think that's either who you are or who you aren't. I think you're either a philanthropic person or you're not. I think you're either a person that's going to surround yourself with people that you want to help, or you're going to step all over people. I think I've always been that person that's wanted to lend a helping hand to others in the industry, and certainly women in this industry too. But I want to help everybody, not just, I don't think I've been given anything because of my gender. I certainly don't think I've been denied anything because of my gender either. I think the biggest thing is work ethic and initiative more than anything, especially in baseball. If you don't know what the heck you're talking about, you will be exposed in baseball. I mean, in a sport that's 162 games a year on a daily basis. So I think it's incredibly important to help people around you, and there's room for all of us, and there's room for especially with all the different mediums now in terms of all the Zooms and podcasts and social media and this, that, and the other thing, and all the digital platforms. There's a lot more available today than when I was getting ready to try to get into the industry. I mean, I must have sent out 100 VHS tapes. I don't even know if you know what the heck a VHS tape is, but I must have sent out 100 of those things before I got my first job. It took me 5 months to get my first on-air job, and that was the one in Wichita Falls, Texas, which was Market 142. So it's a process. And I think the more people you can help along the way, and the more cheerleaders you have, and the more people you can cheer for, the better it is. You don't get anywhere by smashing other people down.
Wow. I mean, you explained that perfectly there. And like, just to speak like hypothetically, because you could talk about, the different aspects of social media today. Like we're on a Zoom call right now, everybody's got their own podcast. Everybody's got their own content. Everybody's trying to be a content creator, whether it's, college kids, athletes, musicians, whatever. Do you think that your approach to wanting to pursue journalism would have been different? Because you talk about, going back to school because you wanted to pursue journalism. You take a mortgage out of your home in order to do it. You're sacrificing a lot. If you had the technology that we have today back then, would you have gone back to school, or would you have just kind of like tried to pick people's brains about certain things and then start your own stuff, as opposed to, again, like going out of your way, spending a lot of money, and then, trying to go a different route? Because I'm just curious about that. Because, again, a lot of kids don't necessarily have the degrees today, but they're finding ways to make it done just because they have a passion for it.
Yeah, that's a good question. I don't think I've ever been asked that question. I think for me, I love school. I've always been a nerd. I've always loved education. I could go and get another, I have a master's. I could go on forever and get a billion degrees. But I don't, that wasn't even an option. Like there was no podcast when I went back to, when I was in college. I've been out of college now for, I graduated with my master's in 2003. So what year is this? 21. I've been out of college 18 years already. I mean, it's very, it's a very different world. That being said, I think there's something to be said about the formal education of journalism, and, kind of the right way to go about correspondence and writing. I mean, television's very different than print, obviously, but in my opinion, I tell people this all the time, you certainly don't need a master's degree. The only reason I have one is because I already had a bachelor's in something completely different. So there's no right way to go about this business. The one common denominator that I think people that are successful, that have achieved a certain level in this industry, is work ethic. Work ethic, initiative, drive, sacrifice, being willing to make sacrifices. I mean, everybody wants to start on air in Los Angeles. It doesn't work that way. Like you have to pay your dues. You know, it took me a long time to get to LA, and I was there for 7 years, and I chose to leave because of personal reasons, but it takes a long time, you know, and everybody wants to have the Dodgers job. Everyone wants to have the Yankees job or wants to be Monday Night Football sideline or whatever. It's a process, and nobody has the same path. But we all who have achieved that level have all worked our tails off to get there. Whatever the path was, we all had that same drive and willingness to sacrifice.
Oh, yeah. I mean, you can't teach passion at the end of the day. And again, I grew up northern New Jersey, big Yankee fan. A ton of my friends are like, I want to be the broadcaster for the New York Yankees. Like, dude, that's probably not going to happen. You know, like you have to have the idea of like, okay, I want to be a sportscaster. How am I going to get there? Because like if you limit to yourself to that one thing, whether you want to be the broadcaster of the Yankees, whether you want to take over for Vin Scully with the Dodgers, like you're not going to be very happy at the end of the day with what happens. Like I feel like you're going to be a very miserable person. But like in your personal experience, I feel like you didn't have to really go through that because again, you decided that you wanted to pursue journalism, but I feel like, you know, working for the Rockies was probably like your number one thing, being in Colorado, being born and raised in Colorado. But then you find the gig with the Dodgers that you really wouldn't have expected to, again, like change your life over the past 7 years. And it all culminated in some of probably your best work.
Well, I do think I certainly didn't go into journalism wanting to do baseball.
Right.
Now I think you go where the opportunities are. And if you sit and talk to Meredith Marakovitz, who is my counterpart for the Yankees, who's a friend of mine, I mean, she'll tell you the exact same thing. Maybe she grew up and said, I want to be the Yankee sideline reporter. I doubt it. Right. But she's qualified and she earned her way to get that job. And it's just an interesting industry, you know. And I kind of say, just like when you're in the minor leagues and you get called up to the show, it's one thing to get called up, it's another thing to stay there. I mean, if you can have longevity in this business, that's something to be proud of. And no, I mean, I never would have thought that I was going to go from, you know, Colorado to Wichita Falls, Texas, to Madison, Wisconsin, back to Denver, Colorado. I didn't necessarily go back to Denver because I wanted to cover baseball. I went back to Denver because I wanted to go home. Mm-hmm. And baseball just ended up being one of the best things that ever happened to me. But had I been like, oh my God, I don't want to cover baseball, you know, I really would have shut the door to a lot of other opportunities. And then, you know, I went from Denver to New York to MLB Network and Secaucus. And then when the Dodgers launched their new network, I came back to the team level and started that network in 2014. So if you try to predict your path, it's like we always say with, you know, the baseball gods, it's like if you want to see the baseball gods laugh at you, try to plan a dinner after, you know, on a day game, because inevitably you'll go into extra innings or you'll have a rain delay or whatever. So you can't really plan. I mean, yes, you can have goals. You can certainly have a goal, but if you have like, I'm going to be this, you're kind of shutting yourself out to other opportunities that you didn't even probably realize that existed or that you wanted.
Right. I mean, you need the foundation at the end of the day. Like the foundation is going to get you to, again, that passion, that drive in order to go out and try and do something, but not necessarily do the specific thing that you have in mind. Again, you kind of have to like expand your horizons in that sense. And you talked about, you know, jumping all over the place, whether it was with the Rockies, going to MLB Network for those 2 years, going to the Dodgers, like in a cold way, like everybody in life is replaceable, especially in the business world. What are like some specific like experiences that you had that you knew like, okay, it was really hard getting here, but now that you got there, you're like, oh my God, it's even harder trying to keep this gig. Because again, everybody at the end of the day can be replaced.
Well, I mean, they hired somebody to replace me a week after I left.
Yeah.
So it goes to show you that everybody is replaceable. I mean, there's people that will live in your heart and in your mind for a really long time, but it's a business. And, you know, as much as I appreciated my time with the Dodgers and they appreciated me being there, like you got to move on. So, everybody is certainly replaceable, but I don't think I noticed, and I'm not retiring. So I'm still going to be doing this. I'm just trying to figure out what the next step is. But for me, and I think baseball, and you can ask Clayton Kershaw this too, I never thought about all I had accomplished while I was doing it. Like there's going to come a time in my life where I can take a step back and look back at what I've done and be like, wow, you know, that was really special. Like sometimes at the end of the seasons, I'll look back at like photos or whatever. And think about, geez, we really did a lot this year. But when you're in the middle of it, I don't think you notice it, at least I don't. And Kirsch is the same way. We've had this conversation at length where he's like, maybe when I'm retired, I'll take a step back and realize all that I've done. And obviously he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. So he's had an amazing career already and he's not done. So, I'll get there someday where I'm like, wow, that's like, there's a lot of really cool stuff I've been able to do, but I'm fortunate. I've been in this industry for 16 years and 17 years and hopefully I'm not done. I don't want to be done. We'll see.
I mean, what was it, a 7-8 year run with the Dodgers? I mean, that's still.
Well, I mean, 7 years and, 7 straight trips to the postseason, 3 World Series, 1 championship, should have been 2, but 1 championship. Traveled to Australia, traveled to Mexico with the team, interview Hall of Famers on a daily basis. Worked with Vin Scully and Jaime Jarrín, 2 Hall of Famers. I put our broadcast team when I was there up against anybody, any national team. And we have an amazing production team. We have an amazing on-air team. Very fortunate. It's one of the best organizations, and I have nothing but praise for my 7 years there. It was a lot of fun. A very difficult decision to leave. I did not take it lightly. I still question it, but it was the right thing to do for my personal life.
So what is that? Because I know you obviously have, your Guidry's Guardian Foundation as well that you started a few years back, and, doing that side by side. Because I know, especially in Los Angeles, living in Los Angeles, a lot of stray animals, to say the least, just, not to single out dogs, which is very sad to think about because I know I'm a huge dog person and I don't like thinking about that stuff, but you doing that, and then of course doing the Dodgers gig, like what was it ultimately for you at the end of the day that made you step away or made you want to step away?
Yeah, I think, I'm engaged and my fiance lives on the East Coast and he has 2 young kids and they're here and he needs to be here with them as he should be. And I think, we did the long distance thing for 4 years and, he's, his work schedule is changed and he's here now all the time. So it was very difficult to me. I mean, being a baseball writer and a baseball reporter is an absolute beating. It's a 200 game season between spring training, living in Arizona for 6 weeks when we were allowed to, 162 game regular season, and then postseason. And the Dodgers fortunately go deep into October. So it's about 200 games a year that I cover. And to do that in LA when we're not traveling and I have no opportunities really to even meet in the middle, it was a lot. And we just decided it was time that, coming off on top with the championship and with him not traveling anymore and needing to be with the kids, that it was time for me to try to do something on the same coast. So that's the only reason. I loved my job and it's as simple as that. At a certain point, your priorities change. You're young. I'm not. So it's like your priorities change in time. And now my life needs some sort of balance. I can't just be all professional because I have this other part of my life that's just as important. As far as Guidry's is concerned, I mean, I have a massive, massive, massive passion for animal advocacy and animal welfare. And, Guidry's Guardian is named after my dog, Guidry, who I adopted in 2009, who was named after Ron Guidry of the New York Yankees. You would know that because you're a Yankee fan. And it's just been something that I've poured my heart and soul in. And in California, big cities in particular, California, Boston, Chicago, New York, Dallas, there's a massive, massive, massive problem of stray animals on the streets and in high kill shelters that get killed on a daily basis just because there's no room. So that's something that, again, provides some sort of balance for me. And I feel like if I could have left LA better than I found it, it was worth it. And, I want to I will always support Southern California rescues. And I hope to be able to expand that, nationwide eventually. But you need balance in your life. If not, you'll go crazy.
I mean, that's, again, the most important thing, I feel like. And you taking, stepping away from that gig to move to the East Coast, because, again, that's probably very, very difficult being on separate sides of the country. Boston being up north, and, of course, you have L.A., Southern California, all the way on the other side, on the bottom side. I mean, that's got to be definitely one of the toughest things doing, especially during a 162-game season, even last year, because, again, last year you're probably isolated in a lot of ways, doing everything remotely. How was that experience doing everything, like not being able to interact with people, like, again, like face-to-face on the field, at least for the most part, at least throughout the early stages, and doing everything like this, like remotely via Zoom?
Yeah, it was awkward. I mean, it was one thing I pride myself on is really having good relationships with the players in terms of being able to really kind of get a sense of how they are. I mean, I know them. I know exactly when Justin Turner fills out his crossword puzzle. I know based on body language how guys are feeling and doing and where they're at in their workout routine and when I can approach and when I can't, and just if they're having a bad day. And that whole thing went away with COVID. And having to do every interview like this, I mean, we win the World Series for the first time in 32 years, and it took me an hour to get a player on an interview because of this, because this is, this is the dynamic and the structure that we have now. And it was just really strange to not be, I mean, I traveled with them for 6 years. To be, to not be with them everywhere was odd. And I think one of my strengths is, the long form sit down interview pieces and the features and those types of things, and just really getting to know the player. And, that got taken away and that got taken away, and the fans being not in the stands got taken away. And it was just such a weird year. I think it was harder to win the World Series this year than any other year. I mean, honestly, like the stuff we all had to go through, particularly the players that they had to go through to even have a season was insane. So, I miss that. I miss the guys. I mean, like today I would be at spring training, and if we were allowed, we would be, they'd be walking in for the first time when pitchers and catchers report, and I would be talking to them and we'd be shooting it. And then I remember there's nothing better than hearing the cleats on the concrete for the first time of spring. When they come out of their morning meetings and they hit the pavement and they're walking out to their respective fields, that sound, there's nothing better. And we don't get that this year. And it's just a weird deal. So that was part of the reason too, that I was like, you know what, if this year is going to be the same way, like there's never going to be a good time to walk away. But, I guess now is as good a time as any.
Oh yeah. Like this year, especially, like, do you know what have you talked to some of your friends in the industry when it comes to reporting this year, especially because today pitchers and catchers report? Like, is it the same deal? You're not allowed to be there, or everything's kind of still remote?
Yeah, I mean, they're in tier 2 again. Hi, girls. They're in tier 2 again. And for example, pitchers and catchers actually reported 5 days ago, most of them, because they had to quarantine. So while pitchers and catchers are physically reporting today in terms of camp, most of them have already been in Arizona or Florida respectively, because they had to quarantine to get ready to get back together again. So, and it's the same thing for reporters. We're not in tier 1. So there's no clubhouse access. There's no player access. You can't go out and just stand on the warning track and watch them do anything, PFPs or whatever. So it's all like this again. It's Zoom. And, or standing 6 feet away from them and screaming a question. It's just a different scenario. And it's like Sophia Minert with the Brewers, she got there, they spring train in Maryville, Arizona. And, she had to quarantine, and it's just a weird deal. And I get it. It's a small price to pay. Obviously safety and health are the most important thing, but so much of what we do on a daily basis as a baseball reporter is the day-to-day interaction with players. And you just don't have that anymore.
So do you definitely feel like it's a handicap situation as opposed to efficient? Because I feel like, again, this is already a year into this whole pandemic, which is crazy. But, like 10 months ago, I had no idea how to use Zoom. Now everybody is so efficient in using all this different types of technology to, again, remotely connect with people. I feel like as we went along, as we evolved with all of this, people kind of realized how efficient it is, picking up interviews. You don't have to be at the ballpark in order to just hop on a Zoom call with someone and get a quick 5 minutes to talk about something that you want to use for the game. Do you feel like this is going to be definitely like a factor that gets played into a quote unquote new normal going into, whether it's halfway through this year, 2022, 2023, when things do get back to normal and things, like fans are allowed back in the ballparks and you're allowed to actually interact with people, in the press room, in the clubhouse, in the dugout, stuff like that?
I hope that leagues and teams do not use this as an excuse.
Yeah.
I hope that we can get back to where we were. I really hope that eventually, I know fans will all be allowed back, because that's just a revenue profit thing. So that's going to happen. Once it's safe for fans to be at full capacity, that will definitely happen. As far as media access is concerned, again, I don't know. You'd be hard pressed to find any player that's going to say, "Oh, I can't wait for the media to be back in the clubhouse." That's their space. They're not real big on it. They don't have to do interviews. It's not in the collective bargaining agreement to say, "Hey, you have to talk to Alanna." They do it because they know I have a job to do, but it's not their favorite thing in the world to talk to the media. And I'm different than the regular media just because I was a team reporter, but I hope that in time we do get back to some sort of normalcy with the way that it was before, because you're missing out on a lot of really, really good stories when you don't have that type of access. And I just hope that now that people see that like the world can still carry on through Zoom, I hope that it doesn't all stay on Zoom, because the only thing I wish is that I would have bought Zoom stock. That's the only thing I wish, I would have known prior to all of this, because we'd all be really, really loaded.
Everybody would have been. I'm shocked a lot of people didn't just jump on that right off the bat. Like as soon as everything was getting shut down, like that should have been my number one thought. Like looking back, bring up a great point. Like I don't know why. But like 90% of having a conversation with someone is like reading body language. And like, I guess you can get that over Zoom, like if you're really paying attention, but at the same time, it's not the same.
No, I knew guys, I could tell how they were feeling based on like the direction that their feet would go. I mean, I could tell I could tell who was coming out of the dugout based on their shoes and the way that they walked. Like I was that in tune. I mean, I was with them every single day, so and even my photographer would, if my foot would turn a certain way, I didn't even have to say anything. He knew I was ready to go and, do certain things. So there is such a disconnect without having that personal interaction on a daily basis, because you don't have the same sort of feel. You only get, I get 3 or 4 minutes with the guy now on a computer before other people have to start asking questions. Like you can't just have a normal sit down conversation. I mean, I wouldn't sit in the clubhouse because there's unwritten rules, but you know what I mean? Like you can't have a normal conversation with a player just as a person, let alone a player and a reporter, just as a person. So very, very different. I mean, I'm thankful we had something, but I hope that it goes back to a time when, you can have a lot more interaction with people.
Yeah, I mean, it must be tough over Zoom, because did you guys have like set times that you're like, all right, you only get 4 or 5 minutes here? Because like, I feel like you being a team reporter in a normal situation, like you obviously have a better relationship with the players than, regular media coming in and out all the time.
Yeah, normally we would go and there's a certain amount of time you can be in the clubhouse, and you'd go in and it would be, 45 minutes to an hour, and you would just go in there and talk to guys. And, I was never the type of person though, if I didn't have something to do, I was not in there. That is their space. I don't want to be in their space. I would go in, I'd get my job done, and I would get out. I don't hang out. I don't loiter. Because I don't want anybody in my space. If I'm working, I don't want someone just standing there staring at me. So yes, there was much more of an opportunity to talk to guys. With Zoom, you're kind of at the mercy of whenever they show up, because you can't go up to them anymore. You're at the mercy of when they actually get up, come to the room, sit down, get on the computer. PR has to get it set up. It's all very different now.
And it stinks being like the World Series season, like you said, first time in like 33 years. Like this is the situation that you guys had to work with during arguably their most memorable season as a unit. Because again, you went to 3 World Series in the last 4 years reporting this team, so like that's definitely got to be bittersweet in a sense. But you actually got to go to Arlington for the World Series, though, right?
I did. I was in Arlington for 3 weeks because they played all the games there in Arlington. So I lived there for 3 weeks. So that was fine. But again, I wasn't on the field. I was in a suite the entire time. So I could have been on the moon doing the same thing I did in Arlington, because I was in Texas, but you'd never know it other than you could see the stadium behind me. But yeah, I mean, I still have yet to see the World Series trophy. I haven't seen it. I mean, I have before, but I haven't seen the one in 2020. Right. So everybody got their picture with it. Normally I'd be on the plane with them. Normally I'd be on the field with them. That emotion and that raw energy, that's what we would have experienced on Sportsnet LA with these guys, like I've done for the last 6 years in the clubhouse with the champagne and that's what we missed out on, because we didn't get to do that this year. So it's unfortunate. I'm glad that we were, again, I'm thankful we were able to have a season at all. It was just, I feel like we were robbed, of the joy of the culmination of what an insane year it was.
Is that some of the more, memorable moments? Like you talk about winning pennants, winning divisions, with the Dodgers, you guys were always in the playoffs, probably won the division more so often almost every year you were there. Like, are those the moments that stick out to you over the past 7 years? The victories,
Yeah.
the celebrations, the champagne, all of that?
I think just what sticks out the most is the opportunity to just see these guys grow up. Yeah. I knew Corey and Jock and Cody before they got drafted, just seeing them become men and dads and husbands and, or husbands, dads, sometimes different order. That's a cool thing to see these guys grow up, to see Clayton throw a no-hitter and just kind of step out of the frame and let his wife enjoy it with him on the field. To see Clayton finally win a World Series, after the postseason narrative, and Kenley, everything he went through with his heart issue and the selflessness of just going into the bullpen and not being the closer or pitching in the ninth, but being willing to pitch in the sixth. Turner, Justin Turner and I basically started with the Dodgers on the same day. In 2014, he was a non-roster invite. It was my first year with the team full time. I was in the parking lot when he found out he made the team. And just witnessing that moment. And he's the face of the franchise. I can't imagine Justin Turner in any other uniform. That type of stuff is really special. Obviously, the day-to-day is cool, but that's what you're expected to see. What you take for granted sometimes are the emotional things that come along the way. And seeing guys really come into their own. Max Muncy didn't have a job. Back-to-back 30-plus home run seasons. Chris Taylor's a totally different guy here than he was in Seattle. I'll miss Kike. I mean, Kike and I had some epic interviews because he's a clown, but he's a good dude, and I love Kike. I love his family. I love it. He became a dad. So to see these guys, like, it's your family. I mean, I was with them more than I was with my own family, and so there's a lot of amazing. This is totally random. I did not plan this. I just happened to have to move into the office, and like this is on my desk. But like this type of stuff, I have to frame it. That's why it's on here. But it's like to be able to work with Vin is amazing, and Irene, and it's been cool. It was a really, really fun. Again, I'm not retiring. Like I want to stay in the game, but I was very fortunate enough to be able to do some really, really fun things.
I mean, that's crazy that you get to see, like you said, these young boys at the time, like before they get drafted. You talk about the Codys and the Jock Petersons of the world kind of, morphing, evolving into young men, into fathers, like you said. Like that's probably the next, phase of my life that I'm really looking forward to, seeing kids that, I grew up with and kids that I've built relationships with kind of, form into young adults and see how they mature over time, like, and you like being in a like a Class A organization with the Los Angeles Dodgers, like you said, getting to work with people who have been working for that industry for 35, 40, 50 years with Vin Scully. I mean, greatest broadcaster who ever lived, like the inspiration for a ton of sportscasters around the world wanting to get into this industry is because of Vin Scully and how he's able to, insert that aspect of storytelling into every broadcast. Like in those early years, like getting to pick his brain had to be like one of the most amazing opportunities ever, because he's probably got just like
he's an amazing man, and he's just as amazing as a human being as you would think he is. I mean, he's just a very, very kind, humble man. And I worked with Vin for 2 years, and he was obviously towards the end of his career. He did it for 67 seasons, so he wasn't traveling as much when I got there as he did in the past, but he's a sweetheart, and he's Vin Scully, and nobody will ever do it better. The one thing I, commend Joe Davis on is he didn't try to be Vin. And that's the dumbest thing he could have done, was to try to be Vin. And Joe is incredibly talented, and he's going to be on our screens for decades to come. And, he obviously respects what Vin did, but he also has his own stamp and his own way. And, it's been fun. It's been really a cool time. And I cherish, I cherish a lot of what I did. And, it just goes to show you, my good friend, a good friend to all of us, really, Pedro Gomez, passing away unexpectedly on Super Bowl Sunday. I mean, that just, I think about him a lot, and I say, that's why I left, because nobody wishes they would have worked more when they're on their deathbed. And that's why I needed to make the move to just change gears and work someplace else, because I just couldn't do it anymore. But it's been incredible. And, I highly encourage people to follow your passion, because that's what this was for me. Sports was my passion. It started out as football. It's become baseball, even though I'm still, Broncos fanatic. But if you follow your passion, whatever the path is to get there, it will never feel like a job.
Right. I mean, just to like allude to what you said about, Pedro Gomez, like well-respected guy. You obviously knew him personally. Like those are kind of like the eye-opening things. Like we saw it with, at least just in the public eye, we saw it with Kobe Bryant last January. Like you see some of these big public figure deaths, and it kind of like makes you like take a step back and be like, okay, my eyes are open now. Like you never really know when your last day is going to be, your last breath, not to sound corny in any way like that, but like you really have to take a step back and, discover what's most important for you at that time. And you're doing that right now, making the move to Massachusetts, like during, again, over the past 7 years or so with the Dodgers, 162 game season, it's a grind. Like you love what you do, but at the same time, it's still really hard doing that on a daily basis. Like your off days, you're traveling, when you're working, it's nonstop. You're insanely busy. What are some of the things, because I know you have the foundation, what are some of the things that you do when you're, again, like traveling with the team at the ballpark to, kind of step away from the game and step away from work? What are some like the hobbies that you do, whether it's like with the broadcast team or kind of on your own?
I mean, I tell you, it's tough during the year. I mean, your social life is non-existent. It's a grind for sure. And the thing that we if we happen to have a day game where we had a chance to go out to dinner, we would go as a team. It'd be me, Joe, Oral, our producer, Mike Levy, would usually be the four for sure that would go. And then, sometimes other folks would join us. We love good food, and we love good wine, all of us. So that was a big thing for us. Oral, Nomar, myself, we're all wine snobs. So they have a bigger budget than I do, but we had a great time doing that. So eating out, having good wine. I would try to work out in the morning if I can, but you don't get back to the hotel until 12:30, 1 o'clock, and you're back at the ballpark at 12:30, 1 o'clock. So you don't have a ton of time. But I wasn't great with balance. I wasn't great with getting away. But I did start the foundation, and that kind of really took a lot of my time. And then last year with COVID, we didn't travel. So it was actually the first summer I got to spend in California, which was really nice, full time. So I've never loved living anywhere more than I loved living in Manhattan Beach. And I've never loved, working anywhere more than I loved working with the Dodgers and living in California. So, it's just a new chapter.
Yeah, I mean, definitely a nice chapter to look back on. And like when you're, again, traveling all over the place, like when you really like take a step back and look at it, like there's so many cool opportunities to try so many different things. Like you said, like all of you guys, like big foodies, big wine people in your own right. I know Joe even has like his own steak channel that he was doing during quarantine at his house. Like he's a big foodie. Like you got to look at stuff like that. Like when you're traveling all over the place, getting to interact with all of these different people when you have a chance, and, getting to experience things that you haven't necessarily experienced before in different cities, different towns, different cultures. It's got to be pretty cool.
Yeah, no, I mean, we've traveled the world. We've traveled the country together, and we travel first class. Listen, I'm not discounting how lucky we are and how fortunate we are, but we also, all of those things that you mentioned, and doing all this stuff that we were able to do, none of it's with their own families. You know what I mean? So you do take their sacrifice in it. Obviously the second to last year when we were traveling, families weren't traveling much, even before COVID. And I never had, like my fiance never traveled with me. So, while we love, I love Joe, I love Oral, we love each other. Like they're my brothers, like Jerry and John Hartung and Ned Coletti. And I'm actually doing Ned's class here in about 10 minutes. But, we love each other, but you're still taking away time from your own family and your own life. And, so there's balance. You have to find that balance for sure. For sure. But I tell you what, the four of us, Joe, Oral, myself, and Mike, we've drank a lot of really good bottles of wine together. And Nomar. When Nomar traveled with us.
Do you, given all of this, like you said, like you were with a family in a sense, but you're not with the family, the people that matter most to you. Experiencing all of this, evolving as a human being, as a reporter, getting to know what your schedule's like, getting to know how to quote unquote balance it, even though, again, it's insanely hard. I personally don't think there's a life balance. Have you found personal things that you can do to improve that, again, life balance in order to spend some time with your family, whether it's, again, over Skype, over Zoom while you're at the ballpark, or, just finding times to meet up with each other throughout the season? So you can have that, satisfaction, that sense of clarity when you're in the midst of a 162 game grind.
I mean, I think that just comes with age and time and experience when you figure it out. I mean, when I first started, all I did was work and work and work and work and work, because you're trying to prove yourself, you're trying to move up, you're trying to, do this, that, and the other, you're trying to learn. As I've gotten older and my life has changed and I got engaged, things are different. My family lives in Colorado, so I'd go to Colorado 3 times a summer with work anyway. So every time we played the Rockies, my mom would come up to Denver and she'd stay with me. So I got to see her all the time. And I haven't seen my mom in over a year now because we didn't travel and COVID. So now I'm really trying to, and she's 77 and she's in great health, but Pedro Gomez dropped dead at 58, you have to find time to do you and do life. And that's kind of where I am now. So, during the season, I would travel all over the country and I'd be able to see friends all over the country on company dime, which was really nice. But when we stopped traveling, that part of my life stopped too. So that's, again, that was part of the reason that I was like, okay, it's probably time to step back.
I mean, that's we have found a way to, again, evolve during all of this. It's tough. Your mother, being 77, my grandmother has been stuck in her home in Florida for the past 12 months, she won't leave. She's very crazy about it. I can only imagine what if Vin Scully was still calling games, and what would have his situation been like this year, with the Dodgers? It's, some people are very, questionable about everything that's going on. I feel like some people are just going to be I guess it kind of all depends where your ego's at in that sense. Just you can't tell me what to do. I'm going to go out and do whatever. But then there's other people that are this is a very serious thing, and you have to, not necessarily play by the rules, but know what your current situation is and know how you're going to be able to adapt to what's going on and what's going to happen in the next few months. Because again, for some people, it's you're literally locked in your homes for almost a better part of a year now.
Yeah, and I think the Dodgers handled everything incredibly well. They told us for the postseason, if I didn't want to travel, I didn't have to travel. Charlie Steiner didn't go to one game. He did the entire radio broadcast every single game from his house. And if Vin Scully, God willing, was still with us, Vin would have gotten whatever he wanted to do it however he wanted, as he should. So the Dodgers made all the concessions they needed to. They kept us safe. There was never anybody in my suite that wasn't supposed to be there when we were broadcasting. So the Dodgers took this incredibly seriously. But yeah, I mean, there's a lot of, different schools of thought about this. And again, in order to have a season this year, they're going to have to play by a lot of different rules, as they should, until we can figure this out as a world and make it safe and make it make sense again for people to go back to normal and fans to be there and players to be okay.
I mean, Major League Baseball, all leagues around the country, I feel have done an excellent job being able to adapt to everything. And, the last thing I want to leave with, because I know you got to go soon, but looking back at all of it now, you're taking a step back, moving to Massachusetts, getting married, focusing on being, family first oriented in that sense. Looking back at everything and looking forward to what you want to do next, what are some of the things that you want to do, whether it's, in sports, in baseball, or outside of baseball?
Yeah, I definitely want to stay in baseball. I mean, I have to stay in this game. I can't, I am jonesing right now because I'm not at spring training. Like this is the first time in 16 years I haven't been in spring training, and I do not know what to do with myself. It's hard. It's hard for me. It really, I struggle. I'm struggling with this. This was not an easy decision, but that being said, I want to stay in the game. I'm talking to national networks. I hope to be able to do something on a national level again, like when I was at MLB Network. But it has to be the right fit. It has to make sense. It has to be something that I can do with my home base being here. And I still very much want to be involved in sports television in some capacity. That being said, I'm still going to focus, on my foundation as much as I possibly can. Southern California is still the priority there. That's where I started it. That's where the connections are and most of the need is that I know of right now. And then just have a life when we can get back to traveling. Every year we go to Maui. That's our place. We couldn't go. Eventually, if we can, someday we'll get married. Because, we'd like to do that. But I don't know. And that's the weird thing. I've always been a person since I was 10 years old. I've worked. I've always been a person that's had a plan, and I don't have one. So it's an adjustment. I know that at some point I'll be back on your television screen. I don't know. We'll see.
It's honestly, like, again, everything not necessarily like where you want it to be. And obviously you got to do the wedding right. You can't do it right now, like during weird times, but it's kind of a cool situation to be in. And it's a good situation to be in, given that you already have the reputation, the experience, the connections. Like, you will definitely be able to find a gig like whenever you want to. Again, like, not right away, but like looking in like the broad scheme of things, like you're going to be set up pretty nicely with whatever you want to do. So it's a good situation.
Well, I feel like from your lips to God's ears. We'll see.
Well, Alanna, thank you so much for being gracious enough to talk to me here for like the past 40 minutes or so. I'll let you get to your class. And again, I hope you're staying safe, because again, on the East Coast, it's got to be like, because I know my sister goes to school in New Hampshire and they just shut everything down. So I'm sure Massachusetts is very, very.
It's just freezing. It's miserably cold, but you're welcome. It's nice to talk to you, and keep in touch and let me know how I can help you.
Well, thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of your day.
All right. Take care, Jack. Bye.